Let me tell you about Native American Christian Academy. Currently, this is where we are serving with our family. We are a K through 12 hybrid school. We have a day program for those families and those students who live close, and then a lot of our students do board at this school. How many of you have been in Native American Christian Academy? And tell the truth, because he knows. No one's been there. Great. How many of you guys remember when it was, hearing about it when it was Sun Valley Indian School? Anyone heard about the school? Okay, a few. And then I'm going to ask you to really show your age. How many of you remember when it was Twin Wells Indian School? Okay, just a couple of you. We are the same school. I started to realize that. We took our students over to Amarillo, Texas for a little presentation at the church. Then we did a little question and answer with congregation members there. And one of the questions they had is, hey, do you do anything with the Church of the Nazarene? Because they have a work pretty close to Sun Valley, Arizona. Said, yeah, we work a little bit with them because we're the same school. I was really glad that the message had gotten out that we had changed our names a couple of times, but we are out there in the middle of nowhere. A lot of you have asked me where Sun Valley is, and I've tried my best to explain it to you, but it's really difficult because there's nothing out there except our school. We were serving in Florence, Italy when I got the call that they were looking for another director. And as we began to pray about whether we were going to come off the foreign mission field and come back to my home country in the United States, we started to have those conversations of what God was asking us to do. I was 8 years old when I got the call to missions in the second pew of a Church of the Nazarene in Shelbyville, Indiana, with my mom sitting right behind us, close enough within striking distance to make sure that we were paying attention if we ever fell asleep. I realize that whenever a missionary comes to speak, that people move even further back than they do when a pastor is speaking. I assume it's because you know that whenever a missionary is speaking, that God's probably going to call some of you into missions. And so you figure that if you go further back, that's going to help you. I want you to know that we're going to say a special prayer for everyone sitting in the back, and I hope God calls you to a place far away. With all the stories that are coming out of Papua New Guinea, apparently that'd be a very good place to start. We decided to take the job to go as the director of the school. And I talked to the old director who was there and getting ready to leave along with the rest of the leadership team. She said, Josh, we want to introduce you at graduation because you're going to be coming in the summer. And we want all the kids to know who you are. So how would you like us to introduce you? And I said, well, I don't know. What do the kids call you? And she said, well, I'm an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene, so they call me Pastor Christy. And I said, well, I'm an ordained elder too, so I guess they can do the same and call me Pastor Josh. Once we got there, my family came over from Italy, and we had 3 days to get settled before my wife slipped into the role as the girls' dorm parent there. And because she was filling in that role, they quickly started to call her mom. And even if you come to our campus now, you will still hear the kids yell from across campus, hey, Mom, and that's because they see my wife there. But as I introduced myself to the kids, I was not in the boys' dorm, so I was not serving in the role of dad. I introduced myself as Pastor Josh and apparently learned that this was not something that was easy for them to say. They needed to come up with a shorter name for me, and they did. And they decided to call me Santa. I decided why fight it and just played along with it. But I started to realize that whenever the kids got together, they would call me Santa. Now, I told you that we have some day students and some students who board with us. For the students who board with us, we are together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The kids go home every other weekend, but for the most part, we spend a lot of time together. And so we get to know each other pretty well. So whenever I would come into the classroom or help them in the cafeteria, almost in unison, all the little guys, the K through 2, would yell, hi, Santa. We had a little boy, kindergarten kid named Sage. He was not boarding with us. He is from the area. And so he would listen as the kids would call me Santa. And I could tell that he would just study my face and try to understand why this was. But not wanting to be left out, he decided to chime in. And whenever I was in the class or in the cafeteria, he would also say, hi, Santa. But as the kids went back to their activity, I noticed that Sage would just continue to stare at me. And I realized over time that he was just trying to figure out if I was the real Santa. we started to notice that this would affect Sage's behavior in the classroom and in the cafeteria. So if you come ever to volunteer with us here at Native American Christian Academy, we're going to go ahead and keep up the story of me being the real Santa. This is how we ensure that Sage is a very good boy. And this is why we feel very comfortable for the kids who do not behave well. We can take gifts away from them. It's not on you, it's on me, and I feel oddly okay with this. I want to start off by telling you a love story. And it's not a love story between me and my wife, because that's not a love story that you want to hear. And it's not a love story between me and my children, because they keep trying to get me to trim the beard, so I don't like them very much. This is a love story about my in-laws, and I know that seems really strange because my mother-in-law is a robot and incapable of love. My in-laws had this horrible habit when we were living on the foreign mission field of trying to spend every single Christmas holiday with us, which was just very strange because I never invited them. And no matter where we went, from Spain to Greece to Romania to Italy, they would always seem to find their way, which was also very weird because I never did tell them where we lived. The final Christmas on the foreign mission field was in the country of Italy, and we were living in Florence, and they decided that they were going to extend their trip and spend 6 weeks with us over that Christmas holiday. Awesome. I decided to take them to all the places that you would normally take someone to if they were coming to visit you in Italy. So we went to Rome, we went to Venice, we went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, all the places that you would normally take someone, and places with large crowds, just hoping that they'd get lost and not find their way back. But I started to realize over time that it's really fun to take them to places that none of us have been to before, so then we get to visit it together as a group, as a family. And so we decided to take them to the city of Verona. Now, if you don't know about Verona, this is the site of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And I really didn't know what Verona had to offer, and we quickly discovered that there were quite a few things to see. So this is my son, Caden, and I at the Roman Colosseum that's there, giving thumbs up and thumbs down to the gladiators down below. This Colosseum actually predates the one in Rome. We were there to see the fortress by the river, the Christmas lights that were there in the city. But ultimately, we find our way to the place that everyone goes to see when you are in the city of Verona. We go to the bedroom of Juliet. It's a museum now, and you can walk through it, but really, I'll be honest with you, not many people pay the money to go into the museum. The more important spot that they go to is this one. This is the balcony of Juliet. And I'll have to be honest with you. It's a balcony in a courtyard. And if you don't see the signs, you're going to walk right by it. And if you were ever in Verona, I recommend you do. Just walk right by it. The tradition is you're supposed to go out onto the balcony with your loved one and have your kiss and share it with all the people who are down below. There are people watching you, so if you go out there and kiss your significant other in front of everyone, that makes you an exhibitionist. And it makes everyone that's standing down below watching you a bunch of voyeurs. It's a glorified crime scene is what it is, but we decided to take our in-laws there and so they could join in on the fun. So my wife and I, we go out into the balcony and we have our kiss and we come back in, and now it's my in-laws' turn to go out there. And they begin their walk going out into the balcony, and I'll have to be honest with you, I was very concerned when I saw them walking, because when I was out there, I didn't check to see if there was a broom, and I knew if there was, my mother-in-law would climb right aboard and go shooting off into the sky writing warning messages like Surrender Dorothy. But I just gave it to God and said, I'm just going to let them go out there. And so they do, and they go out there and they have their kiss and they come back in. My father-in-law, he comes up to me. And as he's coming up to me, he has tears in his eyes. Now, I'm actually very close to my father-in-law. Over the years, we've gotten to be very good friends, partners in ministry, and I'm as close to my father-in-law as I am to my own dad. And over the years, he's given me some great advice, and I knew that when he came up to me with tears in his eyes, that something impactful had happened. Something had happened being out there on this balcony with the woman that he's been married to for so many years, and at least 4 of those years happily. That whatever advice he was going to give me was going to be absolutely life-changing. It takes him a while to gain his composure, and finally he puts his hand on my shoulder and looks at me and says, Josh, had there not been so many people down below, I could have thrown her off. Missions has been a part of our lives for a while now. We actually started off in volunteer missions. We'll see if this works, maybe not. Oh. We started off as volunteer missionaries in Guatemala as a young family. with my wife and my daughter. Karis at that time was only 18 months old. We were first asked to go to Vladivostok, Russia, in Siberia, near the Chinese and North Korean borders. They asked if we'd be willing to go, and we were quite confused because that just didn't seem like something that God had prepared us for. They called a month later and said, would you consider going to Guatemala instead? Would you pray about that? We said, no, we don't need to pray about that. That seems like something God would say. And off we went as volunteers there. We should have realized that there were going to be some issues, especially because this was our first foreign missionary experience as a family. My daughter almost drowned in a decorative fountain as we left her in the care of 3 Guatemalan girls, all under the age of 10, who decided to set her off the ledge and wave at us from across the market to let us know that she was okay as she tumbled over backwards head first under the water. I almost killed my family on a mountain road with no rail as we passed a semi on a blind curve trying to get to the Mayan ruins just 5 minutes faster than we would have otherwise. And we were almost stoned to death by monkeys in the same jungle who decided to try throwing fruit on top of our heads. We realized after our time there that we probably shouldn't be missionaries in Guatemala, and honestly, maybe we shouldn't be missionaries at all. But it was 3 years later that we were globally assigned to our first foreign assignment as official missionaries with our family of 4 to the country of Spain. Living in the center of that country, in the city of Madrid, then moving to Toledo there. In Spain, across the northern part of that country, it's a trail that goes all the way from the southern border of France clear across the country of Spain called the Camino de Santiago. You are supposed to walk this trail and get to your final destination, which is this cathedral. It's not necessarily being at the cathedral that is the important spot, it's what's sitting underneath it, the remains of St. James. Rumor has it that after the ascension of Christ and the disciples begin their Great Commission work, that they go out into all of the known world to share the gospel message. James, he's called over into Western Europe, the country that we know today as Spain. As he arrives, he begins to tell the people there the story of Jesus. And after all of the years of telling that story, only 4 people come to know Christ. Just 4. James has a dream that he's supposed to go back and check on his brothers in Judea, and off he goes. And as soon as he enters back into town, he is captured by Herod and his men. He's martyred as the first of Jesus' disciples killed for his faith. Those 4 followers come over, get his body, and bring it back to where it rests today. And I wonder how often they must have thought that after spending all of this time with the Son of God, as James begins his ministry, only 4 people come to know who Jesus is. Yet when we arrive in Spain in 2010, the signs of Christianity are everywhere. The large cities have giant cathedrals. Even the small towns have churches. In the United States, we know about Jesus because of the message delivered by them, all because of the ministry of one of Jesus' disciples and the continued ministry of 4 more. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. When we arrived, we wanted to find a way to share the gospel message. If we can go over to the next one. We wanted to find a way to be able to share the story of Jesus. And I saw 2 boys skipping school and ran up to them in the park and asked them what they were doing and if they could learn how to do anything, what would they like to learn how to do? And they said, we'd really like to learn how to play baseball. And I had never really thought about baseball as an outreach to the community there. And so I began looking for equipment and realized why they wanted to learn. It was impossible to buy baseball equipment there. So I put out a call to churches and districts just like yours. Would anybody be willing to collect sports equipment for us to begin this ministry? And they started to pour in, and we started to teach. And we realized as we started going through these sports camps that the crowds began to grow. And I realized that if we were going to continue this ministry, then we needed more help. So again, I put out a call to churches and districts just like yours. Would anybody be now willing to come over and help us run these sports camp? And a group decided that they would be willing to. It was led by a husband and wife, and they were very nice and a pleasant couple to be around. We enjoyed getting to know them. You could tell that they were in love with each other, that they loved the ministry, that they loved playing sports, and they were happy to be a part of this Great Commission work. But there was also a sadness in their eyes. You could see it there. They wore it on their faces. And as we got to know them this week, we got to hear their story. That they had 2 sons Both of those sons had died at a young age. Both of them had died in tragic motorcycle accidents. They weren't even sure if they had anything to pour into this ministry. How were they going to work with youth? It had been so long since they had children who were alive. But they felt like God was calling them to do something. They come and lead this camp, and I watch as they begin to pour their energy into these kids, as they teach them how to hold a bat and how to throw a pitch, how to run the bases. And I watch as they spend that week building the relationship with those kids. I watch that crowd begin to grow. What started off as a very small group there on Monday morning ended up being 80 kids by Friday morning and 120 kids Friday evening. I watched as that team ended, as that couple, when it was time to say goodbye, as they began to cry, as the kids that they had formed a relationship began to cry. But what was more amazing is even after they left, I watched as the sports ministry began to take off. As our community approached us and said, we would like to be a part of what you're doing. And we decided that we would also, I'll just tell you guys when to change it, if we get it back on. That we were going to do a sports camp on a bigger scale, that we were going to put it inside the bullfighting arena. And there, as we participated in it, you can just keep moving through those, or I'll see if I have control again. On the next picture, you can even see the blood rings there in the sand right after the bullfight. But as we began to gather with the kids there on the center of that arena floor, we were able to share with them the gospel message. We were able to pray with some of those kids for the very first time and watch them accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, all because a couple, a husband and wife, with sons no longer in this world, felt like they had something to contribute to the great commission work that God had called them to. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. After our time in Spain, we were called to the country of Greece. This is the city of Kavala, the city that we know as ancient Neapolis, where Paul and Silas and later Timothy land. 45 minutes from there, you can go to the city of Philippi, the place that we know as Philippi, where Paul and Silas are held in this prison until God sends a midnight earthquake that sets them free. No matter where you go through the country, you're able to see the ruins of the temples to Apollo and Aphrodite. But the most impressive spot to me in that country was this one. This is Mars Hill, the Areopagus, where Paul climbs up and begins to deliver the gospel message to the Athenians that are there. And even as he begins to tell them the story of Jesus, most of them just stand there and laugh and mock and make fun. Only Dionysius and a couple of others believe in the gospel message. And I wonder how many times Paul and Silas and Timothy and just a few of their followers must have thought that this was a complete waste of time, running from city to city in Greece. Is anyone actually converting? Is anyone giving their lives to Christ? Is anyone accepting this message? Maybe we are just wasting our time. Yet when we land on the shores of Igoumenitsa, Greece in 2016, again, the signs of Christianity are everywhere. Large cities have large Greek Orthodox churches that are there. There are even roadside chapels where you can stop and pray on your journey. All because of the ministry of Paul and Silas and Timothy, and the continued ministry of just a few more who decided that the Jesus message was right for them. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. We decided that we were going to have to find different ways of doing outreach, and we used sports for a while, something that had been familiar with us. But as we were there, the refugee crisis was in full swing. We opened up the church that we had partnered with, and we watched people from Iraq, Iran, and Syria begin to come inside the church. Each week, our crowd began to grow. Every Sunday I would preach in English and it was translated into Greek, and while it was being translated into Greek, it was being translated into Farsi and Arabic down below. As people there were learning about Jesus, some of them for the very first time, I knew that we needed help. We were growing far too quickly. So I put out a call to churches and districts just like yours. Would anybody be willing to come over and help us with this ministry? And a group decided that they were willing. It was a group of teenagers. 3 boys and 3 girls. All of them had just graduated from high school and had no idea what the next chapter of their life would look like, but knew that God was calling them into this work. They arrive, and I watch as they begin to pour their energy into the congregation that is there. I watch as they rock those babies to sleep, as they hand bowls of soup to the mothers who are there, as they read to the children and begin to teach them English. And I watch as they begin to sit around those young Muslim men and introduce them to the Bible and to the gospel of Jesus Christ. I watch as their interest begins to grow, and I start bringing them to my house. I set a fire in the fireplace. And we all sit around the floor as it was a very cold winter in our part of Thessaloniki. Together we open up the Bible and I begin to walk through the stories and explain it to them. I watch as they begin to ask questions, as they become more interested in the gospel message. And one by one, those young men begin to give their hearts and lives to Jesus Christ. I begin to see how they get involved in ministry. Impressed by the Great Commission work of this group of young people who first introduced them to Jesus. I think about Shamal, who right now is in St. Louis, Missouri in the U.S. after marrying an American girl and is ministering in a congregation there. I think about Joanne, who went up to Germany and is a worship pastor in a church there. I think about Hamid, who stayed behind in Greece in order to tell other new refugees there about what Jesus has done for him. And I think about that group of 6 teenagers. No longer teenagers today, some of them married and starting families of their own, each and every one of them still following Christ today. Amen. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. After serving in Greece, we went on to a place that, leaving a biblical site, going to a place that's a little less holy, to the middle of Transylvania. And I will tell you that the horror stories that we hear about Dracula are not near as bad as they seem, but I will tell you that the stories coming out of Romania are. As we worked with survivors of human trafficking down in the capital of Bucharest, and also worked with the Roma Gypsy community up in the northern part, where a lot of these girls are the ones taken from their family and put into trafficking rings. We have a Church of the Nazarene there in the town of Tsigmandru, started to pour our energy into that town. Using sports as an outreach, all of the kids from the community began to attend. I knew that we needed help. So I put out a call to churches and districts just like yours. Would anybody be willing to come and help us with this very important ministry? And a group decided that they would. We go to Tsigmandru to begin to prepare for this camp. We get a call. It's from the team leader who is at the airport ready to board the plane to come over to Romania and help us. She says, Josh, you know that we're a district team. We don't all attend the same church. A lot of us don't know each other very well. We've already run into a problem. There's an elderly couple on this team, husband and wife. Both of them are 85 years of age. We found out that the wife has just received an Alzheimer's diagnosis. We knew that she was suffering from it, but we didn't know how bad it was. And Josh, now that we've met her at the airport, we need to tell you, it's bad. She has no idea who she is. She has no idea who any of us are, doesn't know why she's at an airport, why she's about to board a plane, why she's going to be stuck in a hostel in the middle of Transylvania. She's starting to panic. And to be honest, we're starting to panic too. I'll be honest with you, when I got that phone call, I was deeply concerned. What are we going to do? You can clearly see that we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no medical services. How are we going to take care of someone like this? And then as I get there, and right after this phone call, I start to realize we're going to have another problem. The sports camps that we do are for ages 6 to 16, but everyone invited their younger siblings. And so now on the field, we have 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds. And what are we possibly going to do with them? And I'll be honest with you, as this was preparing to happen, I was furious with God. We had put so much work into planning this work, and when it seemed, do you know how much work goes into planning this? We can't have mistakes like this. What are we going to do with all of these problems that we are now starting to encounter? The team arrives. We bring them to Tsigmandru. And the most amazing thing begins to happen. That team takes the field, and I watch as they begin to pour their life and energy into these kids. And then God continues to do something else. I watch as that 85-year-old woman gets out onto the field, starts doing her best to teach those kids how to throw that pitch and hold that bat. It's time for a game. She looks at the field and realizes that running the bases is no longer in her wheelhouse, so she's going to sit this one out. I watch as she walks over to our makeshift dugout there in the ground and sits there in the dirt. And then I watch as those 3 and 4 and 5-year-old kids that we weren't sure what we were going to do with them, I watch as they begin to gather around her. Sitting on either side of her, they begin to link arms with her. And when there's no longer room to link, they begin to climb on her back and hug her neck as she begins to do the only thing left from her memory of growing up in the Church of the Nazarene. She begins to sing hymns to these children. When this happens, I'm on the pitcher's mound, preparing for the game. And I look over and realize that there's a need for me to confess and repent. That even after all the mission work that I've done and have seen God use all of these people, I had no idea that in this kind of situation, this 85-year-old woman who had no idea who I was at breakfast was somehow able to be the hands and feet and heart and voice of Jesus to these kids that I could never have been, because I was so concerned with the ministry that she was willing to be Jesus to these children. She answered the Great Commission, maybe not fully understanding what she was even doing there, and lives were changed because of this woman. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. From there, we went to our last international site, to the country of Italy. And again, I think about all the sites there that are a testament to the sacrifice that the disciples made. That you can look inside the prison cell that held both Paul and Peter before their executions in Rome. In fact, everywhere you go, you see where lives have had to be given up in order to share the good news of Jesus. And I wonder how many of them, when they're sitting in their cell waiting for their execution, as they eat their last meal and pray their last prayer, sing their last song, breathe their last breath, how many of them thought, was this all a waste? Is anyone going to follow Christ? Am I giving up my life for nothing? Yet when we land there, the signs of Christianity are everywhere. Even on top of the tombs of these disciples are large sanctuaries crying out to God, because they were willing to give everything they had to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. I started to ask the churches there, were any of them in need of a work and witness team? And a church outside of Rome in the city of Civitavecchia responded and said, yeah, we could use a team. They're an older congregation. They said, the church is falling down around us. We can't replace the stucco. We can't take care of the roof. There's nothing that we can do. Would a work and witness team be willing to help us? So I put out a call to churches and districts just like yours. Would anybody be willing to come and help this local congregation? And a team decided that they would. I went down to make sure that we had all the materials ready for the team to arrive. And I get a call from the team leader of this team. She said, Josh, I'm coming on the trip. I'm the one leading the team. You know that I have cancer. And I knew that she did because she had already brought a team to Romania while we were serving there. A day after getting her chemo treatment, she was on a plane on that field helping us play sports in a community there. She said, I'm coming back. I don't know how much time I have. She said, I know that I can't replace stucco. I can't climb up on the scaffolding. I don't know that there's much that I can do. Josh, this time I'm not even going to be able to walk and to stand. I'm going to need a wheelchair when I land. Would it be okay, though, if I came and just sat in the parking lot of that church to watch the work being done? I said, Eunice, of course it's okay. I learned my lesson in Romania, that anybody who wants to participate in Great Commission work, they can. I go down to Civitavecchia to make sure that everything is ready. A German pastor named Ludwig is serving in that church. married to an Italian lady they had been serving in Germany for many years, are now retired from the ministry and serving in this local church. He said, Josh, when you get here, I need to take you over to the house of one of our congregation members. I land. I get into Ludwig's car. And off we go to the house of Jonathan. Jonathan is just a few years older than me, but he is the youngest person in that congregation. And we go to his house, knock on our door, and he lets us in. I sit at his table, and Jonathan looks at me and says, Josh, I just got a cancer diagnosis, and it's a little too late for it. We found out that it's already spread to my brain, and I know what that means. I know that this is a death sentence, and I can tell you that I don't want treatment. I know what treatment is going to do, and I just want to die healthy and in my right mind, as healthy as I can be. I don't want to go through anything. I don't even want to hear the doctors. I'm a new Christian. I wish that there was more that I could do, but I think my time is already up. I look at him from across the table and I said, Jonathan, you can do whatever you want. Just make sure that whatever decision you make, that you are in the center of God's will for your life. And I watch as the tears begin to fall down his cheeks. I had been the only person in his life to tell him that. He said, Josh, would it be okay if I just came and watched the work and witness team work? I can't replace the stucco. I can't climb up on the scaffolding. Would it be okay if I just sat in the parking lot of that church and watched the work being done? And I said, Jonathan, of course it's okay. And wouldn't you know it, that as the team arrives, God brings Eunice and Jonathan together in the parking lot of that church. After many years of fighting cancer, Eunice sits there and talks to Jonathan about the faithfulness of God in her life. The hours that they talk turns into days as they sit there the entire week, as Eunice begins to disciple Jonathan in this brand new faith of his. I watch as people in the community begin to ask questions about why a group of foreigners are working on their church there. And people from the community realize that if there are people from half a world away who are willing to give up their funds and their finances and their vacation time to come over and serve a local church there, that maybe they should be willing to do the same from half a city block away. And I watch as they begin to pour their ministry. The men's ministry begins to grow from 8 people to 22 literally overnight because of the team that is there. As the team leaves, Jonathan comes up to me after the service and says, Josh, I want you to know that after speaking with Eunice last week, I've decided to go ahead and hear the doctors out. I'm going to see if there's anything they can do for me, if there's any more time that I can give to the kingdom. I need to tell you that today Eunice is no longer with us. She's in the arms of her Savior, even as we meet right now. But it was amazing to watch as Jonathan's ministry in Civitavecchia continues to this day. Because of the life that Eunice spoke into him, telling him about all the stories of how God has helped her over the years, giving Jonathan hope that there's still great commission work for him to do. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. We left the foreign mission field to come to Native American Christian Academy. And when I knew they were looking for a director and began the process of asking those questions to find out if this is where God was sending me, I began to pray about it. And God said, Josh, at the age of 8, I called you into missions. And you knew and I knew at that time that those missions would be to the ends of the earth. And in all those years of preparing for ministry, you've always been faithful to serve me in Jerusalem and Judea. Wherever I've asked you to serve, you've served, always in plans to go to the ends of the earth. Why have you never been willing to serve in Samaria? And I began to realize that for me, being outside of the First Nations demographic, that this was my Samaria. A group not far from where I grew up, but who live a very different way of life. If I'm going to go into Samaritan ministry, I need to understand what it is. So I started to dig into John chapter 4 and began to read about Jesus' ministry to the Samaritan woman. That as she comes out to draw water, he is there waiting on her. Begins to introduce himself to her, and I realize that our school is the well. That these children gather from all over to hear the story of Jesus Christ. And that would be fine if the story of the Samaritan woman ended there, but it doesn't. She's so excited that she meets Jesus at the well that she leaves her water there and runs home to tell her family and friends that she has met the Messiah. And I said, why are we not doing that? Why are we not going to the families of our students and letting them know that they are welcome here? We're going to continue to educate our students, but why don't we engage our families? And we started to do everything that we could to bring those families in. As we educated our students, we started to invite them to every party that we had. Parties of celebrating Heritage Week and a fall festival. I even tried my hand at a Thanksgiving party to see how that would go. Even a Christmas celebration that we did together. But the story of the Samaritan woman and her family doesn't end there. They hear her story and decide that they also want to be a part of it. So they come running from their town to the well to meet Jesus there. And I said, why are we not doing that? We educate these students, we engage their families. Why are we not empowering our community? And we decided that we were going to do that as well. Freely you have received, freely give. And we started to do that. Giving from our resources to those in need in the community. Doing all of that in order to encounter our Creator. I don't know what God is asking of you tonight. Maybe He has placed you exactly where He wants you. Maybe you are serving in the Jerusalem or the Judea where He wants you to serve. There might be some here who are being called to serve to the ends of the earth, maybe to take our place in Spain and Greece, Romania, or Italy. Maybe God is calling some of you here to serve in Samaria with us at Native American Christian Academy. But I want you to know that God has prepared each and every one of you for ministry. All of you have been invited to be a part of Great Commission work. All of you have gifts and strengths and abilities and knowledge that can be used in many different capacities. You may be sitting there feeling like you have nothing to contribute, yet I have seen the way that God has used people that He has brought to us to do amazing things, things that I can never do because they were faithful to respond to the Great Commission that God had called them to. Each and every one of you is called. Each and every one of you is prepared. And I can tell you there are people around the world who desperately need to hear the story of Jesus and can hear that story from you. Never underestimate the impact that your participation in the kingdom has on the kingdom. Let's pray. Father, I just want to give you thanks for moments like this. Moments that we're able to gather together as your body and realize that there is a lot of work to do. There are so many people who don't know how good you are, how good you've been to us, and they're not going to know that unless we share it with them. Father, I was 8 years old when you called me, and I didn't know what it meant. I was a kid. I had no idea the journeys and the adventures that you would take me on. But I knew even then that I had to be faithful to that. There's been times when I've messed up, lost opportunities, when I could have talked about you and I didn't. Yet you continue to call us into that Great Commission work, even when we fail. Father, right now, there is a good group here of people who love you, and more importantly, people that you love. Maybe they're serving exactly where you want them. And Father, if that's true, if they are in their Jerusalems and their Judeas, and that's exactly where you want them, I pray that right now you would just confirm that in them. That they would know without a shadow of a doubt that that is exactly where you want them to serve. I pray that those ministries would give them life, that they would just have renewed energy and passion for those ministries. Father, if there are people here that your Holy Spirit is talking to about going and serving to the ends of the earth, I pray that they would listen to your Spirit speak. That if they're nervous or scared about what that might look like, that you would just put their hearts and minds at ease and let them know that the God who calls us doesn't just leave us alone to do it by ourselves, but that you go before us to prepare the way and you walk beside us as we go. We're not alone in this. That you are going to be with us. Father, there may be some that you are calling to serve beside us in Samaria. Short term, work and witness, long-term volunteer. If that's the case, I pray that you would also give them that passion and that energy. But Father, I pray that you would remind every single person here that there is kingdom work to be done. And every single one of them has a lot to contribute to your work. We're fully aware that you could do this without us and obviously do a much better job than we do. We really mess this up sometimes. And yet, for whatever reason, you have invited us along to be a part of it. So, Father, right now, I pray that you would remind us of that calling, that each and every one of us would be workers for Great Commission work. Help us never to underestimate the impact that our participation in the kingdom has on your kingdom. We love you, knowing that you first loved us. And we pray this in your name. Amen.